Hi, so my name's Dan Baird, and this is Unreal Authorized Instructor Virtual Class Training. The topic for today is Blueprint Communications, second part of 2. And we have the same 4 learners as yesterday. If you guys just want to speak up to confirm that you're okay with the recording, just your name and that you're okay. Start with yourself.
Toby, I'm fine with it.
My name's Quinn. I'm fine with it as well.
I am Scott, and I am fine with being recorded.
I'm Daniel, and that's fine as well, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, so picking up from yesterday, just to recap, the approach here is that I am trying to explain how to learn, not just necessarily how to use Blueprint Communications. And I'm using the content example from the Epic Learn tab in the marketplace. And we've went through so far this content example here where we looked at the demo stand, plane simulate, interactive stands, documentation actors. Then we jump back to opening maps and levels, which we found we can quickly switch between here. So we went into the Blueprint Communications map, and we've been working through these examples. So basically how to deconstruct these examples by using play to see how it works, reading the instructions, reading comments, and looking inside of the blueprints to see how they have these different things set up. And the idea is that if we can understand how to deconstruct things and learn from them, that is much better than being able to just follow a tutorial step by step where we will not know what to do when we encounter an issue. Okay, so we went through these first 4 examples, which covered direct blueprint communication, as well as casting. Now we're moving through into the second and third chambers of this tutorial here, where we'll cover event dispatchers across these 3 and blueprint interfaces across these 3. Okay, so let's start here. First thing I want to do is when I hit play, I don't want to have to start all the way down the corridor and run up each time. So let's move our guy up. And somewhere in the world, a baby has cried because I dragged the little widget by the white ball in the middle, which allows free translation in all directions. Top tip, don't do that. Okay, Control Z. I'm going to try and get that red axis a bit more. Good little thing you can do here to move along with the object that you're dragging is you can hold shift while you drag, and that will nicely move the camera for you. So we should be playing from this location now. Okay. So 2.1, this is using an event dispatcher function to call an event in the level blueprint. So this is an example of a blueprint toggling a light bulb blueprint on and off, just like we've seen before, but this time via an event dispatcher function. So the button calls the event dispatcher, which we don't know what that is yet, which fires the event in the level blueprint to toggle the light on or off. Okay, so as expected, we get close, we get on off. So let's deconstruct this and see how it's made so we can understand it a bit better. So first of all, I'm going to press here. I'm just going to use this method. Right click, edit blueprint, and we've got our familiar setup here where we've got trigger collision, flip flop, set a scalar parameter value for the button light material, and then we have a new one here, a little node with a parcel little message, which when I hover over it is calling a delegate. We can see that it has an on off. Okay, so that tells us a little bit something about that this top one is to assumedly toggle on, and this one toggle off. Okay. Got my notes. Yeah. So it said there that it was communicating through the level blueprint, and we have this call button toggled. So this is a little clue about how we can deconstruct this. So let's have a look at the level blueprint. So we go to blueprint, open level blueprint, and this is a blueprint for the level as a whole, the level being obviously everything inside of here, everything inside of the world outliner, and the level itself is a individual blueprint, which is under the maps folder. So yeah, there's a blueprint assigned with this as well. Okay. Importance of blueprints. Nearly everything in here is controlled by blueprints. Okay. Materials, levels, actors, etc. Okay. So very handy to understand how the blueprints work. So we have this here, call button toggled. So what does it do? Let's go into the blueprint communication levels level blueprint. Okay, I can zoom in here, and the person's been very nice and left us number 2.1, event for a button utilizing an event dispatcher function. So let's just have a quick check back here. Yep, 2.1. We know this is what we're looking for. We're just having a look inside the level blueprint. We can see that an event is fired by an event dispatcher function in a blueprint. Okay, so this button toggled is what we've called here. So we've called button toggled. Okay, so this node here makes this event fire. Okay, and what that's doing is it's simply saying when this event happens, then call another event, custom event, where we'll toggle light. Okay, and what we can see is that they're passing in a couple of pieces of information. They're passing in the on-off. So that information is being fed through to this toggle light function. And we've also got the reference. Now, this reference here looks a little bit different to the other references because it has from persistent level. Okay, so this is quite interesting. So how do we get a reference to an object in the level inside the level blueprint? Well, the level blueprint's got a nice way of doing this. So say we have this backboard here. Okay, BP demo display 12, and we have our level blueprint open. Okay, let's just shrink this down. Move this over here. What we can do is we can actually get a reference to this directly by dragging this object in here. Okay, so it's a direct reference inside the level blueprint. So the level already has all of these items in it, so it can just get a reference directly like that, and that's quite nice. And then we can do stuff with this. Okay, we can obviously access functions and things like that, variables. Okay. I think I hit delete there. I'm not too sure. It's disappeared anyway. Okay, so we've got a reference to this object here, which let's assume is this one, right? BP light bulb basic 2. Oh, that's the one. Yeah. Excellent. So this goes through. Let's double click this function. Sorry, this event, because we can double click an event and it'll take us to where that event is coded. So we can see here, we're still, oh no, we're not. We're inside the blueprint light bulb basic. Okay, so we're actually inside of this blueprint here now. Okay, BP light bulb basic. Okay, so as I mentioned there, we can access functions. We have got the item and fired its function. Okay, and passed in some information, which we've got here. Okay, starting from left to right. So we've brought through the on-off, toggle light. We're just going to branch, and if it's true, then yep, we'll make the light flash, update light color, very much the same as what we have in the other blueprints. If it's false, a sequence to stop that timeline, and then update the light color back. Okay, so that looks pretty straightforward. Difference being that we have this call button toggled, and this comes through to the level blueprint, where the level just basically says, okay, now this object within the level, we're going to fire its event. Okay. I know maybe a few of you are excited to see that this is pretty straightforward, and it's probably a good solution to some of the things that you guys have been getting stuck with when you've been doing prototyping. Okay. Is there any questions so far on this event dispatcher? Good, okay, no questions. Now, how does this actually work? Because I can see there is this call here, call button toggled, but how do I actually know like what thing to pull off and call here to get this to fire inside of here? Anyone got any clues? Anyone say anything in the setup here that suggests where we have this button toggled? No. Okay. So if I was completely new, what I would do is say, okay, I need to learn a bit more about event dispatchers, because one of the things that's missing here is I'm missing a connection. I'm missing the jump between here and there, simply in that I don't know how this is. Like, is this something that's already programmed in the engine? It seems very specific, or is it something we've created? So I go to the great source of Unreal documentation. I find the event dispatchers page for my engine version 427. Nice beginner information here. And it talks about creating event dispatchers. So an event dispatcher allows a blueprint class to report on its state to the level blueprint. By binding one or more events to the event dispatcher, you can cause all of those events to fire once the event dispatcher is called. Okay, so this sounds like something happens, I make a call out on this event dispatcher, and then other blueprints that are listening can essentially fire their logic for whatever event it is. Okay. Okay, so creating event dispatchers. Event dispatchers are created in the editor's My Blueprint tab. So the My Blueprint tab is over here, My Blueprint tab. And we can see to create the event dispatcher, we use the plus icon in the event dispatcher category, enter a name for it. Oh, look at that. There we go. So actually, that's where it's coming from. Okay. If I drag this out, just like dragging out a variable, I've actually got some things to do here. I've got call, bind, unbind all, event, assign. I can see this one's call, but I'm not too sure which I need to do. What I could do is I could hover over. It's not telling me too much information. It's pretty straightforward. Or I can read the documentation a bit more to figure out what it is we need to do. So we've got a few things down the side here. Always, when you're reading the documentation, check which section you're in and see what's underneath. Okay, there's also some see all on the right-hand side. There's some related courses, which are on Unreal Online Learning. However, you should make sure that you read through the page and you look at any sub-pages, okay? And we can see here, there is a section on using event dispatchers, how to do binding and unbinding, calling events, creating dispatcher events, okay? Now, I'm not going to read through all of that with you. Obviously, this is how you learn, okay? So if you are by yourself, this is the method I would suggest. Use sources as close to the engine as possible. So documentation is good, okay? So how do I create one? Like it says, I can just click the event dispatcher. So now I'm in experimental mode for learning. So I'm thinking, okay, if they can make an event dispatcher, I want to make an event dispatcher. My event dispatcher. Okay, so what am I going to do? I'm going to create my own event dispatcher, and I want to, it'll be interesting to do. Well, we've got the light going on and off. Let's do something else with the light so that we can use the same trigger to call our event dispatcher, okay? Sorry, I keep clicking this. There we go. So inside the BP button, what I want to do is I've created this and I want to call. So I'm just going to mimic, I'm going to copy the same thing. Okay, mine looks a little different. So that's a question in my mind. Okay, mine looks a little different. Why is that? But I'm going to continue on. So I'm going to call my event dispatcher. Okay, I'm not going to have an on and off, but I'm going to yeah, let's have an on and off actually, but not an on and off. How can we? Well, first, any default values, please compile a blueprint. I'm going to have this event dispatcher and I want to add something to it. So these on the left-hand side are called inputs, and anything on the right-hand side, we've got them, are outputs. Okay, so data flow in, data flow out. So I want to add an input. Okay, I'll call this big, small. Okay, I'm going to leave the default value unticked. And compile here, I've got an error. We'll see compiler error, and we'll also get this message here. If I hover over, it'll tell me exactly what this message is. Could not find a pin for the parameter big small of my event dispatcher on call my event dispatcher. Okay, so a quick look. Yes. So that was just an issue there where I was where I hadn't compiled it after adding the inputs, I believe. So what I can do to do that is I can drag the same thing out again, which creates the same thing without an error. I can also right-click a node and refresh that node so it gets the latest information for what that's supposed to be. Okay, I'm just going to delete that. So now I've got two dispatchers, big, small. I'm going to take this one on. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to try and make the bulb big and small. Okay, so on and off. Sorry, on and big, off and small. Okay, and this is just a test. Can I repeat? Can I basically duplicate what they've done? Do I understand their process that they're explaining to me in their documentation to get the same result? Okay, so let's go with calling this event dispatcher, which is the next. After calling the event dispatcher, we are going to assign and bind the event dispatcher in other blueprints, which is what it explains in the documentation. Okay, so where do we need to assign this event? Let's have a look. So this one has call button toggled. This is on off. Which blueprint is this then handled in? Where are we handling this? If this is the button in the level, where are we actually handling the event for the on off in this setup?
In the light.
In the light. Let's open that up. We have toggle light, and we're in the event graph. Whereabouts in the light? We've got toggle light here, which is a custom event. Nothing outside of there. Can you remember where it was that it was being handled?
Was it the level blueprint?
Correct, yes. We're not going directly to the light with this one. We are going through the level blueprint. It says across the bottom here and in here. So yeah, just have to keep track of where it is we are going with this data. So we go into the level blueprint. Yes, 2.1, here it was. And all that we were doing here is we were, let's bring this up. We were patching this event, okay, and then we were sending it out to a new event inside of the ball. So we'll need a reference to our object that we want. How are we going to get this reference? You remember how I'm getting the reference for this object?
From the world outliner.
Sure, I can drag it in from the world outliner like this. I can also right click and I'll get the option here, as long as I've got something selected in the outliner that I can create a reference to inside the level blueprint. This is exclusive to. I can create a reference to that object. Okay. I could also just use the existing one here if I wish to, but a lot of people will say for safety do use a separate one. Okay, unless they're right next to each other. So we've got this object here. And now we need to get something like this. So button toggled, blueprint button broadcast. Okay, so what's our event called? And this one's called button toggled. That one's called button toggled. So maybe we just start searching for this, the my event dispatcher. I'm going to right click and do my event dispatcher. Oh, nothing. Anyone know what I could do here to get this through?
Attempt compiling it because it may not be up to date.
Yes, I'm going to compile it. Still nothing. Any other clues?
Turn off context sensitive.
Oh, very nice. Right, event dispatcher. Aha! we turn off context sensitive. Okay, now all possible actions is not bound. So context sensitive will essentially, it's the engine trying to assist you to pick the things that are relevant for your right click or for your drag out on different things. Obviously, you want to turn context sensitive on for most things because you want the actual function or feature that is going to best fit. But yeah, for this, we are going to my event dispatcher, turn it off. And we've got a couple of different things we can do. We can assign, call, bind an event. What do you think we should start with?
Oh,
Okay. Looks a lot different to the other one, right? So call my event dispatcher. Call my event dispatcher. So something tells me here, just from visually, what these things look like, that I'm not doing something right. Because I want an event node, right? I want one of these red nodes that I can then feed into an event inside the blueprint.
It
Okay.
appeared as something which can be like inputted into like as a process, not as something which starts like a process. So
link event to, or I think it says that. I can't really see properly. The second one down.
Nope. Oh, geez. Just controls of that. My event dispatcher. Second one down is bind event to my dispatcher. So again, doesn't look like what we need. Jeez. For some reason, this blueprint doesn't want to open. I've got hell on. What's up with this blueprint? Go away. So yeah, let's open this back up. Whoa, what is going on? Right. Want the level blueprint, and we want the buttons blueprint. Okay, so sorry about that. Righto. So yes, we have the light activated here through the level blueprint through the call toggle. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to call my event dispatcher, large and on, off, and small. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can reproduce this. So inside here, the light bulb, we've got the event graph. Okay, so we're going to do this inside here. We're going to create a binding. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use a trusty event begin play. Okay, so at the start of play, we need to bind this listener, essentially. So the thing that is going to listen for the event and say, when this event happens, fire another event, so fire all code. Okay, so what we can do is we can search for my event dispatcher. Okay, so we're going to bind or assign. Okay, let's try both of these and see what happens. So assign has created this, also created the custom event. Let's do my event dispatcher bind. And what we'll see is this is very much straightforward. So this one basically produced both nodes. This one produced just this node. And what we can do here is just add a custom event as normal, some event. And yeah, you may have noticed these nodes previously. We just hook them up. Okay, so that's the exact same way. However, what you'll notice here is that this event dispatcher actually produces the proper output where it's got a big small. This one does not. Okay, so we don't use that one. We won't use this one. So what we're saying is at the beginning of play, we are going to start listening. So bind this event will fire if this thing is heard in the system. Okay, so if this call is made, this will then fire down here, and this event will fire off. Okay, I'll just use a trusty print string for now, so we know what it is. See if we can pick up that event. We have an error. Blueprint self is not a BP button dispatch. Therefore, target must have a connection. Okay, so what this is saying here is that this target here, this thing is not, sorry, this blueprint that we're in, the light bulb, is not the same as the button dispatch. Okay, from where this is. So we need a reference to that button dispatch. How could we, in the light bulb, get a reference to our blueprint button dispatch? We'll see, I have a bad blueprint here. How can we get a reference from this to this? What's a way that we've used before? Get a reference between two actors in the scene.
Just use the world outliner again.
Use the world outliner. So we grab this, pull this in here. Oh no, this is not a level blueprint, so it will not allow us to drag in a reference like that. However, back here in the first room yesterday, we had a situation where this object and this object were talking to each other. Okay, same with this object and this object. What kind of blueprint communication were we using for that?
One-to-one.
One-to-one, yes. So we had a target, yeah? We had a target blueprint, and what was the other one called? The one that communicates with it?
Working.
Yes, excellent. So what we could do is, with this, we could set up a relationship here where it gets a reference to that object. Okay, so we need a reference to one of those types of objects, and it's this one that we're dealing with. So what could we do to set this up? How do we set up a direct reference? Okay, we'll set up a variable inside here. So let's just shrink these down for a second. Let's set up a variable, okay, that will be filled with the information from here, and we can expose that to the editor to pass the reference across. So we need to change the variable type, and it needs to be, the type needs to match this object here. So it needs to be a BP button dispatch. So we change the type, BP button dispatch. Okay, and we're going to go for this object one here, object reference, and not the one with the little level icon. Okay, so we're going to get an object reference. We're going to name that target button. Okay, we'll drag that out into the scene. Get the target button. We compile that. We get rid of our bad blueprint here. Okay. The default, by default, there is no target button in here. That's good, because actually inside the level, when we actually deploy these, we drag them up, we want to set these manually. So we're in the details tab, and we want to set the target blueprint from the button. 1 second. Blueprint like basic, target button. What haven't we done? Haven't exposed this to the editor. There we go. So now I can use this drop down, or if I know the name, or I can just use the eyedropper to get the one I want. Okay. So back here, we are binding an event to begin play. We are getting a reference to that. Okay. So when this one sends its event dispatcher out, we are going to say hello. Let's test this. Good. That means we're having an event dispatcher that is firing. Okay. Notice there's one for in, one for out, just as the event dispatcher for this light bulb on off is firing. Okay. So now we can do some fun stuff. Reason I do a print string is to just test even if the code I've created is firing. Okay. Again, we could have used the debugger, visual debugger as well if we've got the blueprint open. Selecting the instance from the level inside of here. So I'm just going to disconnect this because I'm going to put in some custom code. I'm going to put in a branch, okay, because we've got a condition coming through here, whether it's big or small. On the true branch, what did we say it was going to be? Big or small?
Big.
Cool. And we want to make the thing big, okay? Now, when I say we want to make the thing big, what operation are we going to do with it? I can click inside here and say, okay, anything I can see inside here, generally I can do. Okay, so when I'm talking about here, I'm talking about the details panel. I can manipulate these values. So to make it big, I would look at scale. Maybe I want to scale this up. Okay, so I could use scale. This is what I want to do. I want to scale it up like this. Okay, so like 5 times its size. Okay, so I'm going to go back inside of here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set the relative scale of a light bulb. Okay, so I'm going to need a reference to the light bulb. I'm going to set relative scale in 3D. Okay, so transformation 3D. Okay, the target is the scene component, this light bulb. Okay, scene component, static mesh. We're going to hook this up to true. And we're going to do the same again. Before we do that, we need an actual size. And I can plug values into here hard-coded, or I could make a vector, okay, and plug the values in there. I could also make a variable that I could plug in here. Okay, so I could perhaps promote this to a variable. So I can change this nicely. I could expose it to the editor. Okay, so this is the new scale 3D. Call it something better. So this is what big scale. And then we'll have a one that will be little scale, right? Down here. I'm just going to delete this one out. Again, promote to variable. Small scale. There we go. I'm going to compile this blueprint. This is just so I can adjust the scales, and you can see how kind of the things that we do inside here translate outside. So I said the small scale, we'll just stick with 1. Okay, so exactly what it was. For the large scale, we'll go with 5. Okay, in each direction, X, Y, and Z. Okay, we've got to hook this up like so. And now what we should have is an event dispatcher that is sitting ready at the when play begins, and when my event dispatcher event fires. Okay, probably could be better named. Something like this is going to be our resize event. Resize light bulb. Okay, this is going to fire. It's going to check the condition coming through, and it is going to set the relative scale. Okay. So again, what should we do now before we do it to help us learn? What do I recommend we do?
Check the debug to be able to see lower flutter blueprint.
Oh, I could check the debug. Yes, I could actually set this up nicely. So yes, we have our light 2 selected over here. We could shrink this down a little bit so we can see this a bit better. Okie dokie. But what do I always recommend to do in terms of learning? I think I said it yesterday, where you talk through something before you do it. Not too sure. Don't worry about it. What we're going to do is I'm going to make a prediction right now. If my code is right, what should I see? Okay. And we've said this previously as we were building it, but we should say it again one time before we look at it. So we don't get completely confused with the output. We should expect that the light will go on and large. And then as we come out, it will go off and small. Okay. If we've done it right, then that's what we should get. If we have some other situation, then we know where to start looking to troubleshoot it. Excellent. So we can see that, and we see that. Excellent. And we can see the logic flow in the background that is doing the flicker transition and our new event as well, the resize of the light bulb, which is driven by an event dispatcher. Okay. Excellent. Good. We've been able to replicate their setup by binding an event on begin play here inside the light bulb. Okay. A bit different to how they've done it here, where it's been through the level blueprint. Let's carry on for now. We have a second set here. So in this example, the same blueprint starts and stops rotating animation. In this case, the rotating blueprint binds the button's event dispatcher function to a custom event internally instead of using the level blueprint. Okay, that sounds exactly like we've just done. So that's pretty cool. Let's have a look and see if we have. Yep, so turns on and rotates. Let's look at the blueprint, how this works. Let's first look at the button. So it's just the regular button dispatch. Button toggled is being called, and then there's our custom event dispatcher there. Let's have a look at this item here. We notice that the pole itself is just a static mesh, so we need to look at this item, the spinning logo dispatch. Okay, so inside of this, what do we have? We've got a button blueprint with a custom explanation. That's why it's green, but that's exposed. We've got in the viewport, we've got the base and we've got the logo itself. Any functions, macros, graphs? No, just the variables here for the different items. Rotation template. So yeah, we've got a rotation that's driven by a timeline there. So that's great. We've encountered all these things before. Okay. Oh, look at that. Looks like their setup is pretty much exactly what we've got. I mean, in practice, really. They've used the event begin play inside of this actor to bind to the button blueprint. Okay. From the button blueprint to this toggle spinning. Okay. So it waits at the start, binds a custom event to the button toggle event dispatcher, and then this fires once that event dispatcher is called. Okay. Again, they're passing through on off, set material, rotation, set relative rotation of the logo in the scene based on this rotator, which comes out of the timeline here. Okay. So that's nice. So yeah, the next step up here, so level blueprint and this one, we've managed to kind of replicate that before getting to it. Okay. Okay, so comparing our two, yeah, we can see that our experiment has kind of produced this result here. Okay. Let's move along then to 2.3. So this button will spawn a bomb blueprint when pressed. The button can only be pressed once until it receives a dispatch event notifying that the bomb has exploded. Okay. Let's have a look at how this works. Okay. Oh, there's nothing there already. Okay. Got a bomb. Explodes. Oh, if I stand here, the button presses again and explodes. If I step away. Okay, so it must only trigger while I'm inside. And if I stay inside, it must continue to trigger. Okay, but it looks like it waits for the bombs. It doesn't keep dropping bombs. So that's interesting. And what's the difference here? It's binding an event dispatcher or custom event on spawn. Okay, so we've got the button here. This is a different type. This is a button dispatch bomb. Okay, so we'll come back to these errors in a minute. So it's important. We have an activate event inside the graph here. We've got a viewport with a button mesh and a trigger collision. Okay, we've got some some variables down the side here. And yeah, we've got basically, hide that for a second. I didn't want to get that just yet. We've got the activate, which sets the button disables the button, changes the scalar value in the button material to turn it green. Okay, we've seen that happen. We're getting the location of a spawn point. Okay, and then we are spawning a bomb actor. So we're actually generating a new object in the world. It's putting it into the world outline and it's appearing inside the scene. And then after that, we are binding a custom event, which is going to wait until the bomb exploded as being called. Okay, this bomb exploded event is basically once it's complete, it's going to have a quick delay there. Again, set a scalar parameter to turn the button back to red. It's going to re-enable the button, delay for a short time, which you'll notice if you actually press this button, there's a slight delay before it comes back. And then we're going to double check, is the button still overlapped? If so, then activate again. Okay, now we have activate. So activate here comes back to here at the very start. So this runs in a set like that. But yeah, we have some additional code up here. So what we've got the component overlap for the trigger collision. Okay, when the player enters inside the collision here, again, it's findable here. When the player comes in, overlapping button is turned on to let it know that we are overlapping. Okay, that's why this is checked for again at the end. If the player's overlapping, then activate the button again. Okay, so this is helping it to kind of make sure that the event fires when they go inside and when they are inside, and then when they leave, it will stop the event from firing. Okay. Okay, so that's all pretty straightforward, it would seem. However, where's the bomb coming from? That's something I don't understand. Can't make that connection. Anyone guess where this bomb's coming from? Is there any clues here in the editor as to where this bomb is coming from?
It'll be that purple spawn point.
Okay, so what is this type of thing? Okay, so we've got an object here. When I select it, it actually selects the spawn point. But when I go inside of here, the viewport, I'll zoom out, look around, can't see that spawn point. It's referenced in here, a spawn point. And we're getting the location of this blueprint itself. We're also getting the location of the spawn point. I can see there's a default value over here, 300 units, 150 units. Oh, there's a variable right here. Okay, because anything that is variable inside here will appear inside here, and I can see this is exposed to the editor. Okay, so when I click on this spawn point blueprint, I can see, down in the details panel, there's an adjustable spawn point for this. Okay, and if I start moving it around, yep, I can actually change the spawn point. So let's move it closer to the player and off to the left. Just double check that. If we are right, what should happen?
Spawn closer at the player on the left-hand side.
Cool, excellent, good. Okay, just because you see something, don't assume that. Don't assume anything. Test. Okay, that's a good way to learn, because a lot of mistakes I've seen is where people assume things that aren't true. Okay, right. So back inside here. So this spawn point, how is it actually rendering in the world? Well, there's a little thing here. If you look over on the right-hand side, if we click the spawn point, we get details specifically for this. We saw the default over here, but there's actually other things up here, which is the variable name, type, whether it's editable in the instance. Okay, that's the same as pressing the little button here. And then we have a tooltip, show 3D widget. When true, allows the user to tweak the vector variable using a 3D transform widget. So when I turn that on, we get that inside there. If I turn that off, it's gone. Okay. So if you've never seen that before, this is where this comes from. Okay. And that's being used in the communication as a point for spawning. Okay. And obviously the reason that, the difference here between this one and this one is 2.2 and 2.3 is that we can't do the event dispatcher until the object is spawned. And the event dispatcher that I'm talking about is this one over here. Okay. The bomb exploded. Okay, so this line of code is going to run, but this is going to wait. Okay, so bomb exploded. That's coming from this target here. If we hover over it, it tells us the BP bomb object reference. Okay, which is passed out of this spawn here. So this thing that spawns, it's actually passing its reference on. So let's actually have a look at this bomb. Shortcut here we can use is the browse with a little magnifying glass, which you'll see all over the shop. It's also usually on the right-hand side here in any of the details panels. this will essentially zip us to that bomb inside the content folder. So we could double click that to open that. And then what we can see here is that we have more logic. Okay, so this is the bomb itself. We've got a bomb, a fuse effect, very nice. We've got a bomb event dispatcher right here. So this is actually where this event dispatcher is being held. We've got a construction script that sets up the material, dynamic material instance. And we've got our nodes on event begin play. We're going to start spinning. We're going to animate the fuse. Some nice work here to have it explode as well. Okay, with a particle effect at the location that this object is. Okay, and then what we'll notice here, so this is where this event dispatcher is implemented. This is where it's called. So this blueprint bomb is actually sending out a message back into the system, and it's being picked up by the button to basically reset itself. Okay, and check that the player's inside. So the difference we have here is that we've kind of got forward and backward. So the event dispatcher is going from the button out into the system. It's being picked up by the bomb, and then that bomb is picking, then sending out its own event dispatcher and informing the button, which is listening, that this event has happened, that the bomb has exploded. Okay, so you can probably imagine how event dispatchers are quite powerful in letting other blueprints know about events that have happened in the game without having a direct reference between the two. Okay, because what you can do is say there's a boss at the end of your level. Okay, and when the boss dies, what we need to do is a whole bunch of other stuff. We want to do a fanfare with audio. We want the lights to come on in the room, and we want to open a door and maybe spawn a treasure chest. All these things can happen by having listeners for that event dispatcher, okay, inside there. So you can do one to many without the overhead of having to reference all of these individual blueprints back and forth. Okay. Just before we move on, just quickly check this message log. I see a lot of people make the mistake of not checking the message log to see what's happening. So what we have here is a blueprint runtime error. So the blueprint's having a problem at runtime. Messages access none, trying to read the property of target button. This is in the blueprint BP like basic, in the execute graph, on the event graph, on the assign my event dispatcher. So quick tip here, though I read this left to right, I'll actually start on the right hand side. I'll click this, it'll take me to that exact location. Okay, so we're having a problem here where it's actually getting no reference, I believe, to the target button is what it said. Let's have a quick check. So make sure message log. Assign my event dispatcher. Access none, trying to read the property target button. Okay. Now, when play begins, I believe everything is being loaded into the level. If this thing doesn't exist yet, we may have an issue there. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stick in a little delay, okay, of around 1 second before this event dispatcher is bound. I'm going to play my game again. Okay, so this should be the offending should here, hit escape. Nope, we've still got some errors here. Access none, trying to read the property of the blueprint. Okay, so I need to debug that a bit more to figure out what is wrong with it, why it's getting a null reference here. The default value is none. Do we have one inside the level? Let's have a look. Yes, I believe is the answer. It is this way around. BP button broadcast. Okay. This is hooked up to one. Now, what I notice here is actually this isn't, and we kind of bumped into it before, down that hallway, and we had a bad blueprint when we had a bad blueprint on this. This isn't the only instance of this blueprint in the level. Okay. And if I look at the one again here, the message, okay, if I read it backwards, it's in the event graph, it's on here, the blueprint is this one, okay. It doesn't give me a clue, but I can tell that since there's more than one of these, this one, is the most likely offender. Okay. Target BP like basic. Nope. Wait 1 second. It wasn't that one, was it? It's button dispatch. Sorry, it's this one here. Okay. Yeah, so this one has... No, it's not that one. It's the light bulb. It's not the... Yeah, sorry. I'm getting confused. Yes, it's this light bulb here. So it has none here. If I hook this up to an object, let's say compatible object, this one, because it's looking for that dispatch one, we should be able to have this, and we can verify this by moving along again, holding shift. Wait. So yeah, that error before was basically a hint that we had made a change to this blueprint, but there was another one inside the level that didn't have this functionality that we had set up inside this one. Okay, so don't ignore the event log. If you had say, this was our game and you had made that change, and you're like, oh, excellent, this one's now working. There's some errors there, I'm just going to dismiss them, and you push this back to the Perforce server. Next time people pull, as they go through this, they're going to end up having the same issues, and those errors can quickly build up over time. So it's bad practice to kind of push things if you are getting errors. Okay. Right. That covers event dispatchers, I believe. And last thing here is the blueprint communications through BPIs. Okay. So blueprint interface. Okay. Or BPI, blueprint interface. Okay. Okie dokie. So, example 3.1. In this example, a button blueprint activates an array of different blueprints via a blueprint interface message. Although each blueprint is a different class, okay, so like a chair, a table, car. The fact that they employ the same blueprint interface event makes it possible to activate them all with a single function without needing to cast to each class first. So no casting needed, and we can do one-to-many, okay? So let's see how this works. First of all, let's hope we don't make any babies cry. Do we have this? Yes. Very sad. It's too far away for me to do that effectively. Let's just move back in. There we go. Let's start from a good position. I have released my mouse too soon and ended up in a situation where, yes. So one of the little issues that you can have when you do this motion is if you release your shift key too soon, you will let the object fly back. Okay. So we're going to start spawning here, 3.1. So let's have a look. Okay, that's nice. We've got a light, an LED, and a spinning thing moving. Doesn't look too interesting. We could have done one-to-many before. So what are we going to do in this one? Well, this one's a bit different because we have, as it says, different classes of objects. So we've got a BP light bulb, we've got an BP LED interface, and we've got a BP spinning logo. Okay, so if you remember back to the little Microsoft Paint we did in the last session, okay, we had a parent class and some child classes, and we were talking about how you could cast to one to affect all, because a light was certain, like a big battery and a small battery was still a battery. Disco light is still a light. And in this one, what we have is 3 different actors. Okay, so they all derive from actor, but they are different types of object. Okay, so what's nice here is they are completely different types of object. Control F4 will close those for me. And we're communicating with all of them. So let's have a look at the button as usual. So in the button here, okay. Oh, look at that. That's nice. We've got something exposed under the defaults. We have a target blueprint. Now this by default will be rolled up like this. Most likely want to roll that out. And we can see that each of these objects, okay, has been put into this array here. Okay, so just like the direct references, we have something on this in the details panel inside the editor to pick whatever it is we want to adjust. Okay, let's just Control-Z that. And then inside of the button, what do we have? Again, our usual collision, flip-flop, set scalar parameter. Wow, just one node. Okay, so this interface message function will fire a corresponding event if it's present in the target blueprints. The function will be called for every item in the array. Okay, so we have that array there. It's exposed to the editor. And by default, it's empty. But in here, it's not. Does anyone know why we would want to have these be empty by default inside of this blueprint that we load up?
Would it be so that you could then put something in it when you make a child, or so that you could put something in it when you want to use it? More versatile.
Yes.
You do it so that it wouldn't, because if it did already have something in it, it would affect every instance of that blueprint.
Excellent. Yes, which is kind of what you said. You want to be able to have control. You want this array to be empty and us to be able to fill the array, because yes, if we wanted to create a new type of button, say there's another button in the level, we don't necessarily want it to have all of the same function, all of the same references to those buttons. Okay. So that's nice. Back inside here. Push button. We can see we've got a little message icon again, but this time the target is a blueprint interface player interactions. Okay, and it's targeting an event inside there. Okay, so how are we going to learn this? What clues do we have for where to go with this one? Where should we start looking for where this is going? If I double click this, it takes me to this blueprint interface player interactions. Push button, and it's a read-only empty. Well, it looks empty. Yeah, nothing in here. Cannot create new nodes. It's a read-only graph. We've not seen anything that looks like this before. Got some stuff in the My Blueprint across to the right. Got a couple of functions, a push button, which is the one that we're talking about. Also got a grab interaction, not too sure what that's about right now. If I click on the push button, I can see that there's no description, no keywords, no inputs, outputs. Where is this going? Well, the communication should be between the button interface and these objects, right? And the button interface is referencing these. So let's have a look inside of this light bulb. I've got a grab interact. There's nothing in here. I've got an event graph. Oh, what's this? Toggle light with a flicker transition. Looks exactly the same as before, but something's different. What can we spot that's different? Start from the left. Always start from the left. Yes, I can see you looking at that there, Daniel. We've got this little icon. This is the interface event. Okay. So the way that these work, okay, and to find out how these work, I would do what I did exactly with the event dispatcher. I would look for our blueprint interface. Helps if you spell it right. And I want to be in Unreal Engine 4 documentation. Looking at the blueprint interface section. We have blueprints that declare functions to define an interface between blueprints. So it tells me how to create a blueprint interface, which is great. Just like the event dispatcher, we could spend our time to create a blueprint interface, see how it functions, read through this guide, edit in blueprint interfaces, add in functions, edit in function signatures, other considerations. And then we've also got this subcategory here about implementing blueprint interfaces, which actually goes quite in depth in terms of the implementation. We can see the events there. Okay, so it's right clicking in the event, add in an event, and call on that event. Okay, so This can be a little bit tricky to understand because inside of, or to make the connection between, because inside of your blueprint interface, okay, which it tells us to create a blueprint interface, we actually go to the class settings and we add an interface here. But this blueprint that's calling this push button event on the blueprint interface doesn't actually have one. And that's fine, but it may be confusing. So you might actually have got stuck unless you read the documentation. It's the objects that have the functionality that are going to be calling this event. They need to have that blueprint interface. Okay, so they actually have the blueprint interface on them. So the thing that calls doesn't necessarily have to have the blueprint interface. The other objects that we're going to interact with. So in this level, it is the lights and the spinny light that will have this blueprint interface. Let's double check that. So yeah, let's select all our objects, shift select them, right click here, edit multiple assets. There's the button on the left, has no interface. This one has BPI interactions. This one has 2, and this one has 2. So that's good. We can verify that that's the setup. Okay, so that'll help us when we're creating our own one. How we're going to what we're going to put in which blueprint. Okay. The other thing that we may notice here is that inside the blueprint interface, so if I use the open interface here, this has reference to functions. It's called a push button function. Okay, and what can be quite confusing is actually when it comes through, yeah, it's not a function, but it's actually an interface event. Okay, so there's nothing inside this function, but this function actually comes through as an event in here. So to access pushed button, it's actually event pushed button to get access to that. Okay, so if we're adding this interface into a new object and calling it inside the graph, we actually don't look for a function, we look for the push button interface. And we can actually see down here the interfaces that are implemented through the blueprint interface that we've defined in the class settings. Okay. One of the things that we spotted before was that we actually have multiple functions here. We've got a grab, interact, and a push button. Okay, now there's only reference to push button inside this one. I might want to do some more snooping, or I might want to continue down the hallway here to get an answer. So 3.2. In this example, a button blueprint activates an array of different buttons. Sounds exactly the same as before with the lights via blueprint interface message. Although each button blueprint is a different class, again, sounds the same. The fact that they employ the same button interface event makes it possible to activate them with a single function without the need to cast to each class. So that description is pretty much exactly the same as this description. How does this differ? Well, there's no button necessarily. Okay. What do we have over here? Oh, when we get close to it, click to drag and interact. And we notice this actually has a material that is now glowing. Okay, so I want to click, pull my mouse down. I'm going to pull down. Nice. Turns the light on. Pull up. Turns the light on. Okay. It's hard for you guys to tell, but it's actually controlling where my mouse can be as well, which direction I can go. So when I click there, it kind of puts me in this position. And then as I move around, it's actually controlling how my character can look. So I can't just look away hard to the left while I've got this held down. I have to release my mouse. Okay, so that's interesting. That's just an on-off. That one generates power as I spin it round. This one, pull down, release my mouse, and it pops back up, and the light comes on for some period of time. Okie dokie. So those are interesting. Aha. We've got volumes here, which are on each blueprint. Okay, so let's open these up. I'm just going to remove these old ones here. I'm going to keep the blueprint interface open though. Okay, so we've got a grab interaction. Maybe this has something to do with it. Okay, so inside here, we have a grab interact. So first I just want to check the event. Oh, yeah, there's a bunch of stuff in there. But let's have a look at the grab interact. So this interacts with the switch dependent on player aim movement. So this is actually passing some data through about where the player's aiming. It's breaking this down as to whether they're moving their mouse up or down, which position the switch is in, and then determining whether to move the switch based on the direction that I'm dragging. Then fires a custom event that plays a timeline, and it passes some information back out. So it returns some information back out on the other side. This is kind of the switch handle, whether the player's focused on it. Okay. So I'll double click this. This takes me to the event graph, and we can see that's animating the switch through a custom event. Okay. That the that's called from this grab interact. So when this interaction's going on, it ends. And we're checking the switch position, playing a timeline, and we are setting a relative location of the switch handle based on the value from within the timeline. So a lot of the same stuff we've seen before. When the animation's finished, it toggles the light on or off depending on the direction of the animation. Cool. So yeah, once it's finished, it basically checks, is it in the forward position, like as soon as the correct position that they want, call a custom event for toggling the light. Okay, again, these aren't directly to do with blueprint communication, but we want to follow the string of logic through. And again, we can see this one looks exactly the same as the ones we've seen before for toggling the light. Okie dokie. And changing the light brightness as well, updating the light color on these ones. Okay, so there's quite a lot inside of here, but what is particularly special is the excuse me, is the blueprint interface, which we are looking for right now. Where's it gone? Here we go. It's inside the interactive switch. Okay. That's the grab interact. Okay. So this grab interact we saw on another switch before, because I think it was these ones. That grab interact basically did nothing. It went from here to the return node and it didn't pass in or send out any information. So that's fine. In this implementation, it actually does something. Okay. So blueprint communication here with blueprint interface. Okay. You might think, well, this is kind of one-to-one. It's not one-to-many. Why we want to use a blueprint interface for this? Can anyone guess why we're using a blueprint interface for this and kind of not just doing a one-to-one? Like maybe the volume with the switch.
Is it so you can set parameters with the switch? Because with like the spinny one, the faster you spin it, the brighter it gets, doesn't it? So just clicking on it wouldn't set any limits, would it? So that means you need to be more precise than just drag and drop.
Perhaps. So we have basically the grab interaction, this function that comes through the blueprint interface. It's different to the push button in that it actually has some inputs and outputs that we can use across these different switches. And these switches can basically implement one event for the grab event, and that information can be interpreted inside of each blueprint differently to do different functionality. And well, obviously not if we turn one switch on, we don't want all switches to turn on, but we do want like commonality in terms of their functionality. Okay. So yeah, it allows us to have a grab event for whether it's a switch up and down, whether it's a windy switch that goes round, or just a single pull chain. And we can use this same function, the same event, to drive all of those and also pass through this information, pass out information in terms of the focus. Okay. Also means that we have, we've basically got a less to to deal with. We notice how we've got like the target LED on this blueprint. We don't have one here. We have a target LED on this blueprint. Okay, so different setups. I'll let you guys deconstruct those further if there's any of those that will be useful to your scenario. Okay, but remember that you don't need to do casting. You don't need to do direct references. You can use blueprint interfaces to do one-to-one as well. Okay, as long as kind of the way to use it is think of functionality. So perhaps you have in your game, there's a door, a rock, and a table, and they are different blueprints. Okay, they're different, derived from different actors, but you want them to say take damage when an event happens. Okay, so the door, the table, and the rock can all take damage in different ways, but you could say pass in the amount of damage that's going through from the actor, different things like that. So they can all implement the same functionality through this blueprint interface. Okay, so this one, the final one, communication using blueprint interface function. This demonstrates the how the message is used in projectiles, essentially. Projectile blueprints call an interface function on the sphere when they hit, and each sphere responds differently to the information passed through the interface. So again, it is just like this. They're all getting that same functionality, kind of as we've described, but they're handling it differently. Okay, these ones may look complex, but we'll just quickly break it down. So first of all, what do I notice? Yep, I've got some UI there. This is driven by my box here. So just so I can understand how this is all working. Click, please. There we go. We've got, nope, I've selected the demo room. Grab my box. He's very much not wanting to be grabbed right now. There we go. This is just a trigger box. There's nothing in here. Where would the code for this trigger box be, perhaps, then? It's obviously doing something, right? There's an event firing. If it's not a blueprint itself, which area are we handling the code for it?
Inside the level blueprint.
Yes. So let's have a look inside the level blueprint. Aha, yes. 3.3, events for an enable, disable the ability to shoot projectiles. So when we overlap, we check, is it a type of character? So here we go, we've got a cast going on here. If it is the character that's overlapping, set powers enabled or disabled inside of the player themselves. And then also cast to the hood, we're getting the player controller, so the thing that is in control of the pawn, getting its hood and enable or disable the powers enabled inside that as well. Okay, so very straightforward. So we know what's happening when we step inside. There we go. So left click, right click, just to double check. Left click and right click did nothing before. Okay, so left click. What's happening with that? Oh, just on the left click. Looks like the material is being manipulated, yeah? If I leave it for a little while, material is going back to normal. Very nice. If I right click, more reflective, I've got kind of a wetness going on there. And the fireball cancels it out. Does the water cancel out the fireball? Yeah, it reduces that effect and transitions over. Okay. Fire. Yep, as we expect. Wood burnt, wood wet. The more we do it, the more it happens. They cancel each other out. Pretty cool. Remember, blueprint interface is handling all this. Then the code inside of each object. It's basically okay. So fire makes it shrink. Water also makes it shrink, but not at the same rate as fire. Okay. So just real quick. Let's see, how would we deconstruct this? So it mentions that there's a blueprint interface message for handling projectiles. Okay, the projectile blueprints call the interface function on the sphere blueprints. So let's have a look. So these spheres here should have a blueprint interface on them. Let's edit multiple assets and double check. Do we have an interface in the class settings? Yes. Oh, this is a different one. It's called BPI elemental projectiles. Let's scoot to that real quick. We've got an elemental projectiles function, and this has some inputs for heat and water, which are floats. Okay, very nice. And yeah, we've got some calculations here. We've got one on event tick, which is a sequence for updating the material parameters. Okay, we've got some fancy maths, which would scare someone like me. But if you read through this carefully, it's not so bad. Okay, and basically that's to set the icicles, wetness, and melted effects here. The scalar parameter volume values set whether they're active, things like the dripping, and then destroying the actor if it is completely melted. Okay. That's the ice sphere. The wood sphere, we've also got similar coding going on, burntness, heat, wetness. So all of these objects are taking the data that's coming in from the elemental projectiles about the heat and water, and it's treating them in different ways to produce different outcomes, okay, in terms of the materials, okay, material instances. Okay, so that's those. But it mentions the projectiles. Okay, it says that the projectile blueprints call the interface function. So let's have a look. Let's just do a search for a projectile. Okay, we've got one projectile for water, one projectile for heat. Oh, let's not edit the shared defaults. Let's open them up. So just looking at the fireball, on event begin play, we've got some things happening here in terms of setting the speed, direction of projectiles, orientation, turn off effect to give particles a chance to fade instead of disappearing suddenly. Yeah, we've got a whole bunch of things that are making this effect, to sell on the effect, making it look nice. But this is what we want to be paying attention to, okay? So this event begin overlap fires when projectile overlaps a dynamic actor. Okay, so when the projectile actually overlaps an actor, that's dynamic. We're going to check if the overlapping actor is another projectile, just in case we've got two that's collided with each other. If it's not that, then what we're going to do is we're going to try and call this interface function on the target blueprint. Okay, how do we know it's going to the target blueprint? Because we're taking that event actor begin overlap and we're plugging it in here. So we're saying if it's not a projectile, then come out and feed it in here to test basically, can we fire this blueprint interface inside of this blueprint? Okay. And if we do, we will also spawn and emit at location, destroy actor. Same with the event hit. Okay. So if you have a need for this type of functionality, you could examine this content example and deconstruct it to get what it is you want. Okay. So yeah, just to recap, we have basically basic communication one to all or one to many. And then we've got a kind of one-to-one relationship, but they all share the same functionality. And again, we have that, but it's being called from the projectiles which are being spawned out as opposed to the collision box over there. Okay. So blueprint interface is pretty flexible in terms of the functions events. Blueprint interfaces are for sending information. Okay. So obviously the value is being passed through, so it sends it through the blueprint interface. And event dispatchers listen for information. Okay, so if you imagine kind of where they are, the connections, we have the blueprint interface, we have the two blueprints. You're sending the information through that blueprint interface. Okay, so you're pushing that information. Whereas with the event dispatchers, you're setting up listeners around the level, which on these different blueprints, which are waiting for that information to come to them. Okay. The BPI is, again, a working actor and a target actor. Okay. So it still uses a direct reference. Whereas the event dispatcher, you create event dispatchers in the working actor and your target actors bind to them. Okay. So you don't need a direct reference with an event dispatcher. It basically goes out into the engine, and then anyone listening for that call will respond. Okay. So in summary, kind of over the 2 days here, how to learn Unreal Engine. Okay, I think that's very important. You want to look for quality sources. Okay, so these example projects, very good sources. If you take the time to break them down, a lot of people overlook them. When I first started out, I cracked one of these open. I was like, oh, there's some cool stuff in here. I looked at the blueprints, got really scared, and stayed away. Big mistake. If I'd have spent more time just carefully analyzing this, I could have basically learned a lot more, a lot faster, and produced less errors in my work if I'd have spent the time with it. Documentation, again, very close to the source. It comes from Unreal Engine. It is up to date for the version that you're on. It will explain things. It can be a little dry sometimes, difficult to understand, but there's plenty on there. And I've got some links coming up for you, particularly in terms of blueprint communication that you can follow up. Another really good source is the Unreal Online Learning Platform. So these are the videos that you guys have already tried. Very good if you want a visual, like follow along. And these also are kind of built up as kind of instead of just very super precise things, they are kind of like a bunch of tasks that you'll need to do to get a desired outcome. They are also strung together in kind of learning sets where it's kind of, if you want to be a level designer, you should do like this set of videos, then this set of videos, then this set of videos. Next, I would consider YouTube tutorials are okay if you have a good source. People like Matthew Palagier, Game Dev. What I would say is it is possible that you will find a source that has something very specific. You will want to build something, they've built it, but they may not build it in a way that is optimized. They may not build it in a way that can be expanded upon easily. Okay, so it's very easy for you to fall into the trap of following a tutorial click by click, getting to the end. It either hasn't worked or you have some kind of problem as soon as you go and try and change it because you haven't actually learned how the system works. You haven't took the time to break it down. They haven't communicated all of the smaller things, okay, all of those spontaneous learning aha moments that you need to get from going through documentation, going through content examples. Another good source is the Unreal Engine forums and Answer Hub. So the forums have people on there, has some moderators. Answer Hub is not exactly a Wild West, but it is kind of anyone can answer your question. Okay, Epic do have their own support that's reserved for people who have a special license with them for that kind of one developer stuff. But they do lots of very good live streams as well on YouTube. They are posted to, but they are done through Twitch every Thursday. In particular, those ones I love to watch. And then, yeah, you've got community guides, things like the unrealcommunity.wiki. Is a good place as well. That's generally kept up to date. I believe they're a mega grant recipient, so that means that they are obviously doing quality things for the community. Okay. Another tip about past quality sources is go slow to go fast. Okay. You want to get the basics and fundamentals down. You don't need to learn everything. Okay. The kind of the posters around us prove how deep all of these systems are. Okay. You just need to get the fundamentals down: navigation, creating projects, saving. Okay, and then what you want to do is identify learning paths. Okay, so am I interested in art? Am I interested in code or design? Okay, go on to the Unreal Online Learning and find those learning paths. Find communities, subscribe to them. So there's Discords, Unreal Slackers. There's also in the forums many subsections from different disciplines. And then what you want to do is you want to learn what you need when you need it, because Unreal Engine is wide and deep and it's evolving and pushing out updates all the time. Lots of new features coming in. Okay, no point learning the entire engine because by the time you have learned the entire engine, there'll be new updates out. Okay, so kind of narrow it down to a general area that you like. There's no harm in being a generalist and kind of knowing a bit of everything. The Unreal Online tutorials are really good for guiding you through some generalist stuff that you need to know. But yeah, find that kind of area that you wish to find to excel in, and then really dig deep on those content examples to get what it is that you want. Okay, should be specific to the projects that you're doing. Okay, if you're never going to use a water shader in your game, then there's no point in doing like a 10-hour lesson on water shaders. Okay, and then the last thing, past quality sources and go slow to go fast, is learn by doing. not just by following instructions. You want to think versus follow. Okay, if you just follow, you'll end up in the trap of, yes, I did it, but I never remembered it. If you had to take the time to think, make mistakes, you're going to learn this thing a lot faster. Okay. Getting stuck is good. It means that you're at a point where you can test yourself, where you can learn something new. Okay, failure is natural. Perseverance leads to success. And yeah, ask for help. This is not just good because it helps you get unstuck, it also helps your communication skills, because there's a lot of technical terms here. If you post something on a forum to say that you're stuck and you need some help, most likely the person's going to ask for some context. They're going to ask for some screenshots. They're going to ask for some other questions that will get you thinking a bit more deeply about, oh, have I actually set this up? Have I set the game mode up correctly? And other things like that. Okay. Very easy to make a fundamental mistake. People make them all the time. Being able to speak about it competently is great. And again, helps with communication skills that you will have to learn to be concise. Yeah, understand and be understood. There's a kind of a phrase that you want to seek to understand others first before you seek to be understood. And have fun. Yeah, at the end of the day, you shouldn't do this just because you have to. That's where that kind of like questioning, guessing what's going to happen, experimenting to see what you can break, if you can replicate something, that really adds to the joy of using the engine. Okay, so I've got some now you try activities. We have solo. Basically, what you're going to do is you're going to open this level. You're going to walk through just the different stands, 1.1 to 3.3. And you're going to recap verbally the methods that are used for Blueprint communications, using the play button within the Blueprint communications map. Okay, so you don't want to have to deconstruct everything. You just want to stand at each stand as you walk through, say, this is using this is how it works. Okay, write it down, we'll compare it and see who gets these right. Okay, and then in pairs, you're going to deconstruct or attempt to deconstruct 1D, 1E, and 1F in the example project welcome map. Okay, so those are the ones at the very start where we said you'll come back to those later. And then in your own time, I've got some documentation guides that I'll link below. And there's a homework, which is to review and or follow along with the video resources that are listed. Okay, so there's documentation and then there's the video resources. Okay, you don't have to look at them all, but we need you to be able to look at least one or two. And then I need you to answer next time we meet, which sources best explain Blueprint communications to you. Okay. I've explained it in one particular way, how I see it from my perspective, but there are lots of ways to do it and lots of little tips and hints that you can pick up from other people about how they use it and why they use it in a specific way. What we're going to do is ask basically, how reliable do you rate each of the sources that I've linked and why? And then which parts of Blueprint communications do you feel you don't understand? Because trust us, this is very easy to mistake, very easy to get wrong. I've made a few mistakes myself as I went through this. Okay. And that's it. Thank you very much.